Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine, if you will, the vast, intricate tapestry of life on Earth. From the smallest leaf to the grandest mountain range, everything is connected, constantly moving, constantly changing. You've brought us a truly fascinating section from Raven Biology of Plants, and today our mission is to peel back the layers of this incredible text. We're going on a deep dive to extract the most important nuggets about how Earth's ecosystems actually function, how organisms interact, and how these relationships create the astonishing diversity of environments we see across our planet. Think of us as your expert guides, here to help you connect the dots to the science of ecology, breaking down complex concepts and bringing the textbook to life. Get ready for some truly surprising facts and really a whole new way to see the world around you. This deep dive is designed to give you a powerful podcast-style summary of these key chapters, focusing on core ideas, processes, and vivid examples, all without needing a single visual.
Indeed. And what's fascinating here is how these chapters immediately ground us in the tangible, showing us that ecological principles aren't abstract but, deeply rooted in the living world. We're going to embark on a journey that first explores the fundamental dynamics of communities and ecosystems, delving into the one-way flow of energy, the endless recycling of nutrients, and the fascinating, often surprising interactions between species. Then we'll zoom out to survey the grand tapestry of global biomes, understanding the forces that shape life across different latitudes and altitudes, creating everything from steamy rainforests to the icy tundra. This raises an important question for us and for you, our listener. How do these local and global forces interact to create the living world we inhabit? And what critical insights can we draw from this interconnectedness for its future?
So let's dive into the foundational question. What exactly is ecology? It's a term we hear frequently, but the textbook clarifies it not just as the study of organisms in relation to their environments, but more precisely as the study of ecosystems. What's the significance of that subtle shift, looking at things as a system?
That emphasis on system is absolutely crucial. It means we're not just observing individual organisms or species, we're analyzing all the interacting parts together. An ecosystem encompasses both the biotic elements, all the living organisms, from bacteria to plants to animals, and the non-living environment. The water, chemicals, rocks, minerals, and the air itself. All these components are constantly in dynamic exchange, shaping and being shaped by each other.
And the scale of these ecosystems can be truly mind-boggling. We could think of the entire Earth as the biosphere, which is the global ecosystem.
Right.
But then you can zoom all the way in. The textbook is a fantastic, almost miniature example of an ecosystem within a single picture plant leaf. Can you describe that for us?
It's an incredible illustration of a self-contained world. Imagine a pitcher plant leaf, shaped like a deep, elegant cup often found in boggy environments. This cup collects rainwater, becoming a tiny freshwater pond. Insects are lured by nectar, fall in, and drown. As these insects decompose, they provide a rich nutrient source, sustaining a complex community of bacteria, single-celled protists, and even small invertebrates, all living and interacting within that small pool of liquid. This miniature, co-evolved world, all within a plant's leaf, perfectly demonstrates how ecosystems function at dramatically different scales.
That's a powerful image, a whole world in a leaf. Wow. But it also highlights the profound challenge of studying these systems. The book emphasizes that everything from cell physiology to genetics is relevant. It suggests you can't truly understand an ecosystem by dissecting its components in isolation. Is that right?
Exactly. This leads to what ecologists call emergent properties. These aren't qualities you can predict or observe by studying individual parts. They're processes and characteristics that emerge only when components interact at higher levels of organization. It's the difference between, say, studying a single musician and experiencing a full orchestra. The symphony is an emergent property of their collective interaction. This complex interconnectedness is why ecologists grapple with big questions. Why do we find grasslands in one region and dense forests in another? Why do tropical regions burst with species diversity while the Arctic is comparatively stark? Answering these questions demands considering everything from climate, soils, and geology to predators, pollinators, microbes, and millions of years of evolutionary history. The ultimate goal is to explain how these systems came to be and, critically, to predict their future changes, whether they are pristine natural areas or human-affected agricultural systems.
Right. And to make sense of this intricate complexity, ecologists use a hierarchical structure for analysis, starting with individuals as the basic living units. Then, all the individuals of the same species in one place form a population. All these different populations in a particular area then constitute a community. Finally, that aggregate community of all populations, combined with its physical environment, forms the ecosystem.
That framework helps us organize our thinking, but it's important to remember that nature often defies neat categories. As the text notes, defining an individual can get fuzzy with plants that spread vegetatively, like a desert bunchgrass where separate stems might arise from the same root system. Does the plant end where the connection disappears, or does it persist underground? These are the nuanced challenges ecologists face. Ultimately, ecosystems aren't static, they are the ecological theater for evolutionary play, as ecologist G. Hutchinson famously put it. Evolution creates the actors and the stage, and ecology describes the ongoing drama.
Okay, so with the stage set, let's talk about the engine that drives this entire play: energy. Ecosystem energetics is all about the flow of life's fuel. And this is a crucial distinction from materials, right? Energy flows one way, it's not recycled.
Precisely. This is a fundamental concept rooted in the second law of thermodynamics. All captured energy is eventually dissipated as unusable heat. While energy can be stored like starch in a potato or fat in an animal, it must eventually leave the system as heat and can never return. It's a constant, open-ended input. This entire process begins with autotrophs, or self-feeders, which capture usable energy from the non-living environment.
And most of us think immediately of plants capturing solar energy. Those are the photosynthesizers, green plants, phytoplankton, the dominant autotrophs.
Yeah.
But there are also chemosynthesizers, microbial life found in extreme habitats like deep ocean hydrothermal vents, extracting energy from inorganic molecules. They contribute far less globally, but highlight the diversity of life's energy solutions.
Absolutely. Then we have the heterotrophs, organisms that feed on others by consuming living or dead organisms. This group is incredibly diverse, from bacteria and fungi to whales and humans. But even this clear distinction can blur. Consider the Indian paintbrush, a beautiful, colorful plant that looks like a typical wildflower. What's surprising is that its roots actually parasitize other plants through specialized fungal connections, drawing energy and nutrients even while it photosynthesizes itself. It's both autotrophic and heterotrophic.
That's a fantastic example of life's unexpected twist. And it leads us directly to the concept of trophic levels, essentially, the energy ladder of an ecosystem. At the base, the first trophic level are the primary producers: trees, algae, lichens, grasses. Then, primary consumers, or herbivores like a caterpillar eating a leaf, are the second trophic level. Secondary consumers, carnivores like a warbler eating that caterpillar, are the third. And tertiary consumers like a kestrel eating the warbler are the fourth. What limits how high this ladder can go?
The limits are purely energetic. Two key factors. First, all metabolically useful energy originates with those primary producers. Second, and this is critical, at each transfer up the food chain, from sunlight to plant, plant to herbivore, herbivore to carnivore, a significant amount of energy is lost as heat. On average, less than 1% of the sunlight hitting vegetation is incorporated into biomass, and only about 1/10 or 10% of the energy from one trophic level is assimilated into the next. This means energy sharply declines with each step.
Wow, only 10% transfer. So the idea of the super raptor that only eats other eagles is energetically impossible. There simply wouldn't be enough energy to sustain it. This also explains why the largest land animals in history, like the massive Argentinosaurus or the giant rhinoceros like Caraceratherium, are always herbivores.
Precisely. Being at the bottom of the food chain, where energy is most abundant, allows these immense creatures to acquire the vast quantities of food needed to sustain their size. It's an energetic advantage that allows for gigantism.
But then we encounter the world is green paradox. If herbivores are constantly eating plants, why isn't all the photosynthesizing tissue consumed? Why are there so many plants left?
It's a great question, and there are two main non-exclusive explanations. First, predation and parasitism often keep herbivore populations in check, preventing them from over-consuming their food source. A classic example is the Channel Islands, where feral goats introduced without their natural predators decimated the native vegetation. Second, plants themselves have evolved sophisticated defenses. Plants that historically evolve without grazers are often far more palatable, but those under constant attack develop an array of strategies, from tough leaves to chemical deterrents, to make themselves less appetizing.
That leads us to the essential, often overlooked group, the decomposers. These are the unsung heroes that feed on all the dead and discarded organic matter, the detritus, which still contains usable energy.
The decomposer food chain is incredibly complex, and just as vital as the one we traditionally think of with plants, herbivores, and carnivores. While large scavengers like vultures play a role, most of the work is done by a vast array of small to microscopic organisms, burying beetles, flies, millipedes, nematodes, earthworms, and most crucially, fungi and bacteria. Their critical function is to release badly needed nutrients back into the biological cycles in usable forms. Without them, nutrients would remain locked up, and life as we know it would grind to a halt. They're also essential for building rich, moisture-retaining, well-aerated soils. Composting is just us mimicking this natural process, really.
This highlights a crucial point for us humans: energy bookkeeping. The Lake Cayuga study, for instance, dramatically illustrated the efficiency, or lack thereof, of energy transfer. If the 1,000 kilocalories of energy are captured by algae, only about 6 kilocal would reach humans eating smelt, and a mere 1.2 kilocal if we ate trout that had eaten the smelt. That's a huge drop-off.
It has profound implications for human food choices and the future of our species. Eating lower on the food chain, for example, consuming plant-based foods directly rather than animal products that have consumed plants, makes significantly more original energy available. In a world with a growing population, plant-based diets can support a much larger population. To achieve reasonable food equity, especially in affluent countries, we likely need to reduce our meat consumption to free up more of that original energy.
These fundamental energy principles are also visualized through ecological pyramids of energy, biomass, and numbers. The pyramid of energy always shows a wide base of primary producers, rapidly narrowing through successive trophic levels. This is the universal truth of thermodynamics in action, right?
Exactly. The pyramid of biomass, the total mass of living organisms, generally follows the energy pyramid in terrestrial systems. A large base of plants supporting a smaller mass of herbivores and even smaller carnivores. But here's a surprising fact. Aquatic systems, particularly those dominated by phytoplankton, can have an inverted biomass pyramid. A smaller biomass of phytoplankton can support a larger biomass of zooplankton. This paradox is possible because phytoplankton have an incredibly high reproductive rate, rapidly replacing themselves, thus sustaining a greater mass of consumers despite their lower standing biomass at any given moment.
That's a really counterintuitive but fascinating insight. An inverted pyramid. And then we have pyramids of numbers, which can take various shapes depending on the size of the organisms.
Yes.
A single large tree, for example, can support thousands of insects, creating an inverted pyramid of numbers, even if the biomass pyramid is still upright.
This variability highlights that simply counting organisms doesn't always reflect the underlying energy dynamics. Another critical aspect tied to energy and biomass is the accumulation of dead organic matter, leading to fossil fuels. Decomposition rates vary enormously. Rapid and warm, moist, oxygen-rich environments like tropical rainforests, but inhibited by cold, aridity, or lack of oxygen, like in wetlands and bogs where peat moss accumulates.
And on a much grander scale, fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, are essentially the accumulated organic matter from past photosynthesis, transformed over millions of years by geologic heat and pressure. They are stored solar energy from millions of years ago.
And here's the stark reality. Humanity is consuming these fossil fuels at an unsustainable rate. Our annual coal consumption, for example, is estimated to be roughly 60,000 times greater than the historical maximum accumulation rate. This is simply not sustainable, and we're rapidly depleting the most accessible sources. This pushes us to seek renewable biological energy, using current plant production as fuel, a practice as old as burning wood and as new as extracting methane from animal waste or burning corn stalks for electricity.
But the biofuel controversy shows it's not a simple solution. Algae cultivation is energy intensive, and diverting cropland for terrestrial biomass fuel means less land for food or converting species-rich natural ecosystems into energy plantations. It comes back to the laws of thermodynamics. Human ecosystems cannot violate them. We must consider the total environmental cost of all energy alternatives.
Absolutely. And this entire discussion about energy and fuels is inextricably linked to global climate change. The overwhelming scientific consensus is that human activities are driving climate change at rates unprecedented in most historical cycles. To mitigate the most severe consequences, per capita fossil fuel use must drop significantly, especially in affluent countries. This demands tapping into every feasible, renewable, non-polluting source: wind, water, solar, biomass, and for some, nuclear energy.
Okay. Moving beyond simple linear food chains, food webs give us a far more complete and detailed picture of energy relationships, dividing ecosystems into specific species or functional groups.
And they reveal incredible complexity. Even small ecosystems can have hundreds of nodes and links, which is why they are often simplified in diagrams focusing on abundant species or lumping similar groups like, all the bacterial detritivores together. This complexity brings challenges like omnivory, where species like humans or many fish consume at multiple trophic levels, defying simple categorization. Or prey switching, where an animal might change its primary food source based on what's most abundant.
We also need to recognize the often unseen but hugely impactful role of parasites and parasitoids. Parasites live in or on other organisms, feeding on them, but typically not killing their hosts. They are diverse, always one trophic level above their hosts, and ideally, they keep their host alive as long as possible. Seems logical.
But parasitoids are a different story. These are mostly small wasps and flies that develop within host insects, eventually consuming them from the inside out and killing them. Imagine a tiny wasp emerging from a caterpillar pupa, a chillingly effective strategy that ensures the prey's inevitable death.
Wow. This complexity, this vast web of life, leads to an important hypothesis. Ecosystems with more species and more pathways for energy flow should theoretically be more stable, more resilient, meaning their basic functions remain within a certain range, resistant to catastrophic collapse. The logic being that if one pathway fails, others can compensate. Is that the idea?
That's the core idea. While challenging to verify in every real-world system, the emerging consensus, based on extensive research, is that species diversity does have a positive, though not always overriding, buffering effect on ecosystem resilience, helping to prevent total collapse.
Okay, so if energy flows, then what about the actual building blocks of life? That brings us to the Earth's lifeline. Nutrient and material cycling. This is where the story shifts dramatically from flow to recycling. The nitrogen atoms in our own bodies, for instance, have been used countless times before in other organisms.
It's a closed-loop system, fundamentally different from energy flow. The scale of this recycling varies with the element. Global cycles involving a significant gaseous phase include water, carbon, and nitrogen moving across the entire planet. Local cycles, primarily in solution or suspension, are for elements like phosphorus, calcium, and iron, remaining more confined. Elements also occupy different compartments, like atoms locked in sedimentary rocks for millions of years versus those readily available in shallow sediments.
Phosphorus is a great example of this variability. It's vital for life, but its availability in terrestrial ecosystems is complex. Some is immediately available in the soil's liquid phase, some is locked up in organic matter, and some is chemically bound or within intact rock. Soil scientists focus on available nutrients, meaning forms that plants can access within a single growing season.
And these available nutrients or other vital resources are often limiting factors for ecosystems. Water is a primary limitation across vast land surfaces, creating places like the Atacama Desert, the driest desert in the world, where some areas receive less than a millimeter of rain annually. Carbon dioxide can also limit photosynthesis, though human activities are, ironically, increasing its global levels, reducing that constraint while accelerating global warming.
And nitrogen, crucial for proteins, is often deficient in soils. Adding nitrogen to many ecosystems dramatically increases plant growth. It makes you think about the history of agriculture.
Indeed. A major technological breakthrough in the early 20th century allowed humans to produce nitrates from atmospheric nitrogen, effectively injecting vast quantities into the global cycle. While revolutionizing agriculture, this has also caused profound disruptions, such as the infamous dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, fueled by excess nitrogen runoff. Nature, of course, developed its own solution long ago with nitrogen-fixing bacteria, like those in legume root nodules, which convert atmospheric nitrogen into usable forms. Plants forming mutualistic relationships with these bacteria gain a significant competitive advantage.
A landmark study that truly illuminated nutrient cycling was the Hubbard Brook experiment in New Hampshire. Ecologists wanted a quantitative understanding of nutrient storage and movement in a deciduous forest.
They employed a mass balance model, meticulously measuring all inputs and outputs. The choice of location was brilliant. Watersheds underlain by nearly impervious rock, each drained by a small stream. This allowed them to precisely measure nutrient loss by channeling stream water over a V-notched weir, essentially a V-shaped structure that allowed them to measure both the volume and chemical content of water leaving the watershed. They also tracked atmospheric inputs like rain and snow.
And the findings in the undisturbed forest were astonishing. These ecosystems were incredibly efficient at conserving mineral elements. Annual calcium loss was only about 0.3% of the total in the system, and nitrogen was actually accumulating.
But then came the crucial clearing experiment in 1965-1966. They cut down all trees, saplings, and shrubs in one watershed, leaving the organic material and soil undisturbed, and sprayed herbicide to prevent regrowth. The results were dramatic. Water runoff quadrupled, and nutrient losses for calcium and potassium soared to 20 times higher than in the undisturbed forest. The nitrogen cycle was severely disrupted, with microbes releasing ammonia and ammonium, which nitrified into soluble nitrates that simply leached away without plants to absorb them. Nitrate levels in the stream even exceeded safe drinking water standards, causing an algal bloom.
That's a profound conclusion. It forcefully demonstrated that living systems are absolutely crucial for retaining nutrients, holding them against the natural forces of dilution and loss. It's not just about the chemistry of the soil, it's about the living organisms within it.
Exactly. It underscored the intimate and powerful connection between the biotic and inbiotic components of an ecosystem.
So, moving beyond who eats whom, ecology is fundamentally about the intricate interactions between organisms. Everything is connected is not just a poetic phrase, it's scientific reality. Food webs show energy, but they also hint at these deeper, often subtle complexities. One of the most fundamental interactions is competition.
Competition is indeed a core driver of natural selection. It's defined as an interaction where two or more organisms use the same required resource that is in limited supply. Experimental evidence clearly shows that an organism performs better when its competitors are removed, precisely because it gains access to resources that would otherwise have been consumed. This can be resource competition for a specific resource or interference competition, where organisms indirectly contend, like birds aggressively competing for territories regardless of immediate food abundance.
For plants, light competition is fierce, especially where other resources are ample. Plants produce leaves that intercept nearly all available light, and any plant that raises its canopy above its neighbors gains a significant advantage by shading them. This is why tall, woody plants, trees, are the winners in the evolutionary struggle for light in favorable habitats. Makes sense.
But life finds a way. Shade-tolerant species have seedlings that survive and grow slowly in low light, patiently waiting for a gap to open in the canopy. And then there are the spring ephemerals in temperate deciduous forests, like trilliums. Imagine these beautiful, early-blooming flowers with broad leaves appearing before the trees leaf out, quickly photosynthesizing and storing energy, then going dormant when the forest canopy closes and shades the forest floor. They brilliantly exploit those brief highlight windows.
In deserts, the competition shifts dramatically. With water as the limiting factor, trees are sparse and perennial plants are widely spaced. Here, below-ground competition for water is paramount. Yet paradoxically, you often see a nurse effect, where larger shrubs shelter seedlings and young plants like giant cacti from the sun's heat and drying winds. This protection offsets the competition for soil moisture, allowing the young plant to eventually grow larger than its nurse. That's fascinating.
This brings us to the principle of competitive exclusion. Two species with identical environmental requirements cannot coexist indefinitely. One will eventually be eliminated. The classic duckweed experiment vividly demonstrated this. When grown separately, Lemna polyriza grew faster than L. giba, but when grown together, L. giba completely replaced L. polyriza.
And the ingenious reason for this was that L. giba has tiny air-filled sacs that allow it to float as a dense mass over L. polyriza, effectively shading it out and causing its demise, even though it was the faster grower in pure culture. It's a powerful illustration of how one species can competitively exclude another.
So if competitive exclusion is a principle, how do so many species coexist, especially in incredibly species-rich habitats like tropical forests with hundreds of tree species per hectare? That's the coexistence puzzle. One answer is subtle specialization. Our world is heterogeneous, favoring different species in different places. Adaptations that make a species dominant in one area won't work in another. Even slight differences, like a spruce preferring sunnier, drier sites while a fir tolerates shade and establishes in forests, allow for coexistence. Constant disturbances, like storms, also prevent any one species from completely dominating.
So it's not a rigid winner-take-all scenario. What else contributes to this incredible diversity?
Well, sometimes competitive exclusion simply takes an incredibly long time. If growth rates differ only slightly, it could take millennia for one species to eliminate another, allowing them to coexist for long periods. Herbivory can also be a check. In England's chalk grasslands, rabbits historically kept competitive grasses in check, allowing many other plant species to flourish. When a disease decimated rabbit populations, those competitive grasses quickly took over. Newer explanations even suggest that evolutionary processes might generate new species faster than competitive forces can eliminate them, creating a dynamic balance of specialization, environmental variation, and long extinction times.
Beyond direct competition, some plants engage in allelopathy, a kind of chemical warfare where one organism produces chemicals that inhibit the growth of others.
It's a fascinating strategy. We see it in the fungus Penicillium praecogenum producing penicillin to inhibit competing bacteria. In plants, Desert shrubs like the creosote bush, Laurea divaricata, produce allelochemicals from their roots that inhibit nearby burrowweed and even other creosote bushes. Interestingly, burrowweed itself was only inhibited by direct contact with its own roots, suggesting a complex asymmetrical interference. This kind of chemical interaction even has agricultural applications, with sorghum strips used to reduce weeds in subsequent crops.
On the more cooperative side of interactions, we have symbiosis, an umbrella term for complex, evolved relationships that are non-competitive, non-parasitic, and non-predatory. These can range from weak associations to essential ones.
And within symbiosis, mutualism is where both species clearly benefit. Their growth, survival, or reproduction are enhanced. We often think of lichens or legumes with their nitrogen-fixing bacteria and root nodules, or plants with their pollinators and seed dispersers. A particularly profound example is mycorrhizas, the mutualistic association between plant roots and fungi. The fungi specialize growing on or into root tissues without causing damage, and in return for proteins and sugars from the plant, they provide superior access to soil nutrients and water. Some are highly specific, others quite broad in their associations.
And one of the most striking examples of coevolutionary mutualism is the relationship between acacia trees and ants in Mexico. The bull's horn acacia has unusually large, hollow thorns, nectar-secreting structures, and protein-rich tips on its leaflets.
Daniel Jansen's classic experiments revealed that ants of the genus Pseudomyrmex live in these thorns. They vigorously defend the acacia, swarming out to sting and bite herbivores, and even girdling invading branches of other plants that attempt to shade the acacia. With ants, the acacia grows rapidly, topping other vegetation. Without them, it grows slowly and often dies from insect damage or shading. The ants, in turn, are completely dependent on the acacia for food and shelter. It's a truly spectacular, tightly coupled mutualism.
That's a perfect illustration of how deeply intertwined species can become. And speaking of intertwinement, the world is green. Paradox means plants are constantly engaged in an arms race with herbivores and pathogens, developing a remarkable array of defense mechanisms.
Yes, plants employ both physical defenses like spines and tough leaves, and most importantly, chemical defenses through secondary metabolites like topanoids, alkaloids, and tannins. These compounds make herbivory more difficult and are a major focus in crop resistance research. Tannins, for example, are distasteful phenolic compounds that are always present and increase in concentration with attack. When gypsy moths defoliate oak trees, the new leaves are higher in tannins, tougher, and have less water, inhibiting moth larval growth.
Interestingly, some herbivores, like the monarch butterfly, have even evolved to store these plant poisons for their own protection against predators. It's a complex chemical dance.
Indeed. This intricate understanding of plant-herbivore interactions also has a practical application in biological control, using herbivores to combat invasive plant species. Invasive plants often thrive because they've been introduced to new habitats without their native parasites or herbivores.
The prickly pear cactus in Australia is a legendary success story here. Introduced from Latin America, it rapidly spread across vast grazing lands in Queensland, forming impenetrable thickets, like something out of a movie.
The solution was to introduce the South American cactus moth, Cactoblastus cactorum, whose larvae feed directly on the cactus pads. This led to a dramatic reduction in the cactus, almost completely clearing pastures by 1929. The moth drastically reduced the cactus but didn't entirely eliminate it, ensuring the moth's survival to control regrowth. It's a powerful visual example of successful biological control. However, there are inherent risks. Exhaustive testing is crucial to ensure the introduced herbivore is specific to the target plant and doesn't escape to native species, a concern now with the cactus moth spreading in the southern U.S.
What this whole section on interactions really reinforces is that life is built on these diverse, subtle, and often co-evolved relationships, from the grandest mutualism to the fiercest competition, even down to the cellular level, with mitochondria and chloroplasts originating from bacterial interactions. It's layers upon layers.
And building on these intricate interactions, we come to the development and change of communities and ecosystems. The fundamental truth here is that living systems are inherently dynamic. They constantly require energy and are always responding to environmental changes. A true static equilibrium is rarely, if ever, achieved, even in human-managed systems.
Right. Think about maintaining an urban lawn. It requires constant mowing, weeding, and reseeding. It's never truly at a steady state.
Yeah.
Ecologists study why some systems change predictably, recovering to a steady state after a disturbance, while others shift unexpectedly or cycle through destruction and rebuilding. To understand this, we can imagine two contrasting models, the cooperative and the competitive.
The extreme cooperative model envisions an ecosystem where each species gives and receives equally. Trees collect energy, smaller autotrophs use residual light, herbivores take a fair share, and decomposers recycle nutrients. This implies a perpetual steady state. The extreme competitive model, on the other hand, is nature red in tooth and claw, where every species struggles for resources against competitors and enemies. Parasites and predators don't eliminate hosts out of altruism, but because disturbances or host countermeasures prevent them. In reality, ecosystems exhibit a complex middle ground, a dynamic interplay of cooperation, mutualism, and competition, predation. Interactions are never simply good or bad.
This dynamic change often manifests as succession, the orderly, predictable process of recovery after a disturbance. We see this with abandoned agricultural fields reverting to pre-agricultural conditions. A weedy field gives way to grass, then shrubs, then fast-growing trees, and eventually to long-lived trees.
Early ecological theory, particularly from F.E. Clements, proposed a climax community, a stable, self-maintaining endpoint of succession that was characteristic of a region and would return unless intensely disturbed. He viewed ecosystems almost as superorganisms with a healing capacity. However, this theory proved too rigid. It didn't fully account for systems constantly subjected to recurring disturbances like floodplain forests or chaparral, which are in a state of perpetual readjustment.
So modern concepts shift the focus to resilience,
Yeah.
a system's ability to return to its original state after disruption, and stability, its resistance to disturbances. Ecologists now recognize that ecosystems can undergo nearly irreversible change if pushed too far, leading to a different ultimate state.
A prime example of this change is primary succession, the colonization of essentially barren areas. Volcanic activity offers the most dramatic illustrations. The 1883 Krakatoa eruption, for instance, covered the island with 60-80 meters of ash, destroying all vegetation, yet recolonization began as soon as it cooled. Birds recovered quickly, beach vegetation appeared in 3 years, and after 100 years, the island was essentially covered with forest again. Another powerful example is Mount St. Helens in 1980. The lateral blast and ash deposition devastated the area, but pioneer plants like lupine, a legume, played a crucial role by adding nitrogen to the sterilized soil, allowing other plants to establish. Imagine desolate, ash-covered landscapes in 1982, utterly transformed into striking, recolonized forests with conifers, grasses, and other plants by 2005, a testament to nature's powerful recovery over time.
Then there's secondary succession, which is recovery after a disturbance where much of the physical environment and some organisms survive. A great example is white fir replacing quaking aspen in northern Arizona, where seedling white fir trees grow under and gradually replace older aspens, representing a predictable stage in a forest development towards a more stable state.
And as an ecosystem recovers from massive disturbances, succession blends into more subtle changes, especially in its later stages. These are dominated by scattered, small to medium-sized disturbances that open gaps in the canopy. Gaps are inevitable in forests. A dying tree falls, damaging neighbors, creating light gaps. These can be random or clustered, like after windstorms, and there's even an estimated turnover time for an entire forest area to be affected by gap formation, around 60 to 250 years in tropical forests, and about 100 years in temperate ones.
When a gap appears, it creates opportunities for growth. Seedlings already in the understory, the seedling bank, can grow into the canopy, or new individuals can establish from seeds already in the soil, the seed bank, or from newly dispersed seeds. Small gaps favor the existing seedling bank, while larger gaps with more light and exposed soil allow fast-growing invaders.
This dynamism even includes dominant switching, where one species might replace another and then later be replaced back. This could be due to parasite or predator pressure on abundant species, or, as a newer idea, Hubble's neutral theory suggests that local abundance determines which species invades a gap more by chance. Gaps aren't just for forests. In prairies, burrowing mammals like badgers and gophers, or large grazers creating wallows, create bare soil patches that opportunistic annual weeds, like ragweed, can exploit before perennial species reclaim the space. These gaps are likely the origin of many widespread weedy species.
Fire is another incredibly significant form of natural disturbance, and it's deeply intertwined with human history. Lightning-caused fires have always been a factor, making it challenging to know what pre-human vegetation patterns truly looked like. But humans, once they mastered fire, used it extensively, further shaping landscapes.
A compelling illustration is the sugar pine in California's Sierra Nevada. Historically, magnificent sugar pines like those in Yosemite were maintained by periodic low-intensity fires that reduced brush and smaller competing trees, such as white fir, which often grow densely at the base of these stately pines. However, strict fire exclusion policies allowed these shade-tolerant species to flourish and replace the sugar pines. This is why controlled burns are now advocated, though recent large fires exacerbated by climate change are depleting pine populations and recovery is uncertain.
Conversely, too much fire can be a problem. The Tecate cypress, a closed-cone conifer, needs fire heat to release seeds, but the adult trees are sensitive and killed by fire. If fires occur too frequently, before enough seeds can accumulate, entire populations can be wiped out, as has happened along the U.S.-Mexico border.
This highlights the human management challenge. We need to adjust fire recurrence for each vegetation type. But many fires are human-caused, making it a social as much as an ecological problem. Past fire suppression policies have led to a dangerous accumulation of biomass, resulting in larger, more damaging crown fires that kill entire forests. Restoring fire to its natural role means reducing these hazards and implementing regular planned burning, which is costly and complex. We're also seeing dramatic changes like the pinyon juniper dieback in the southwestern U.S., where severe droughts combined with bark beetle attacks cause mass mortality. Recovery is slow, and climate change may prevent full recovery, converting these areas to more drought-resistant vegetation.
This brings us to restoration ecology, the science of reestablishing natural communities. While some view humans as drivers of the global ecosystem, evidence like fossil fuel depletion suggests limits to our control. The precautionary principle advises allowing natural processes maximum freedom.
Restoration is crucial for preserving native biodiversity and vital ecological services like clean air and water. A pioneering example is the University of Wisconsin Arboretum, started in 1934 by Aldo Leopold on damaged agricultural land. The goal was to recreate Wisconsin's natural communities, like tallgrass prairie. Imagine a vibrant, restored tallgrass prairie in late summer, filled with purple blazing star, white flowering spurge, and yellow prairie coneflower, a testament to successful efforts.
And they learned so much from this work. The Curtis Prairie, for example, provided key insights into the importance of fire for prairie ecosystems. Prairies need recurrent fires, natural or human set, to prevent tree and shrub encroachment. We can literally see controlled burns being carried out on a prairie in late fall, illustrating fire as an essential management tool. Similarly, ponderosa pine forests, historically open with frequent understory fires, now require thinning of small trees, promotion of grasses, and reintroduction of understory fires to restore them to their historical state. Restoration is more than just planting. It can involve removing species and reintroducing disturbances.
So what key principles can we take away from this exploration of community and ecosystem dynamics? First, dynamism. Change is inevitable, no true equilibrium. This change is not always gradual or favorable to humans. Second, diversity and complexity. The more we study, the more layers of complexity we uncover. We don't fully understand why there are so many species, but protecting them is essential. Third, connectedness. The global ecosystem depends on these intricate flows and cycles with multiple, often mutually beneficial interactions. And fourth, abstract theory limitations. Our knowledge is partial, provisional, and constantly evolving, requiring continuous outdoor learning and observation.
Now let's zoom out from those local dynamics to global ecology. The local ecosystem functions we've been discussing, say in a 10-meter patch in the wet tropics versus a moist temperate zone, ultimately depend on much larger global patterns of solar energy, temperature, and soil moisture. The global climate machinery is constantly redistributing heat and moisture around our planet.
Indeed. While local shifts over just 100 meters can change the organisms present due to substrate, slope, or extreme events, when you look across continents, you see repeating broad-scale patterns. This is where convergent evolution becomes truly striking. Imagine two very different plants, say Espalidia from the Andes and Dendrosenecio from Mount Gesi in Tanzania. They look remarkably similar, with compact tree forms, robust leaves, and protected growing points, even though they evolved independently on distant continents. This isn't just a coincidence. Similar harsh high-altitude conditions, freezing nights and warm days, favored those identical effective adaptations.
It's like nature found the same effective solutions in different places. Wow. In our modern world, humans have drastically modified these global patterns. 40% of Earth's surface is now devoted to agriculture, and much of the rest is altered. Understanding what pre-human landscapes look like is crucial, not just for historical context, but to grasp what we risk losing if we don't act to protect our biological heritage.
Absolutely. The extent of human modification is pervasive. This makes understanding what the Earth's landscapes looked like before our species' impact vital, not just for historical context, but to grasp what we risk losing if we don't act to protect our biological heritage.
To make sense of these vast global patterns, ecologists use the concept of biomes. A biome is defined as a type of vegetation that is reasonably homogeneous over large terrestrial areas, based on the growth forms, sizes, and arrangement of dominant plant species and their associated animals.
Think of it as Earth's major vegetation types. While global maps simplify these vast regions, it's important to remember that biomes contain considerable internal variation. These broad patterns are shaped by global gradients, moving from poles to equator, wet to dry, and low to high elevation.
The Earth's shape and its 23.45-degree tilt are fundamental to these gradients. Solar radiation per unit surface area decreases from the equator to the poles, creating vastly different energy inputs. The tilt also creates our seasons, with hemispheres tilting towards or away from the sun, leading to maximum solar radiation at 23.45 degrees north or south during their summer solstices, and dramatically increasing day length poleward in summer.
These solar radiation patterns are then significantly modified by global air currents, which redistribute heat and moisture around the planet. At the equatorial zone, intense heating causes moist air to ascend, dropping moisture and creating high precipitation, think lush rainforests. This air then dries and descends around 30 degrees north and south latitudes, warming as it sinks and leading to low precipitation, which creates the extreme deserts found in these belts. The Earth's rotation then twists these airflows, creating the westerlies and trade winds.
And elevation also plays a huge role in local climate, creating dramatic changes over very short distances. The temperature lapse rate means air temperature generally decreases with increasing elevation, about 6.4 degrees Celsius per 1,000 meters. So higher elevations are significantly cooler.
And this cooling drives orographic precipitation. Moisture-rich air masses are forced upward over mountains, cool, and release precipitation on the windward side. Mount Wailili in Hawaii, for example, receives 9.5 meters of annual precipitation on its windward side. That's a lot of rain. But as that now dry air descends on the leeward side, it warms and holds more moisture, creating a dry rain shadow zone. You can vividly picture this. Moist air hits a mountain, rises, cools, rains. Then dry air descends on the other side, warming, creating a parched zone. This effect is very strong along the Pacific coast of North America.
It's like altitude mimics latitude. Alexander von Humboldt famously pointed out that climbing a tall mountain can take you through vegetation zones, similar to those you'd see traveling poleward from the equator tropical rainforest at the base, temperate deciduous forest, taiga, tundra, and finally a snow-capped peak. It's a powerful analogy for how climate shapes life.
What's interesting is an exception in tropical mountains. They experience less seasonality than temperate mountains, so it's summer every day and winter every night, which favors unique plant types like the Espalacia and Dendrosenecio we discussed earlier with their compact protected forms.
Besides global climate, local influences like soils and fire also play a big part. Soil isn't just ground-up rock. It's a complex sub-ecosystem that determines nutrient availability and soil moisture, shaped by climate, parent rock material, and time. And fire is a major disturbance. It requires dry, combustible fuel, which is influenced by climate and weather. Areas with a moist growing period followed by an annual drought are highly vulnerable, and fire has undoubtedly driven the evolution of fire-resilient plants.
Let's embark on a brief tour of a few major terrestrial biomes, highlighting the range of adaptations and principles at play. We'll focus on those that best illustrate the extreme diversity and challenges of life on Earth.
First, the incredibly diverse tropical rainforests. These are defined by consistently warm temperatures and ample year-round rainfall, leading to conditions perfect for high photosynthesis and maximum growth.
Competition for light here is intense, leading to dense canopies of evergreen, broad-leaved trees. The understory in undisturbed areas is often sparse due to the deep shade. Plants here exhibit fascinating adaptations, like epiphytes, plants that grow on other plants to reach the light, such as orchids and bromeliads. Imagine leafy tufts on tree branches, where the leaves form watertight tanks that collect rainwater, supporting miniature ecosystems of bacteria and insects while providing nutrients to the plant itself. Tropical rainforests are biodiversity hotspots, with hundreds of plant species per hectare compared to far fewer in temperate forests. This extraordinary diversity is attributed to consistent warm temperatures, moisture, and ample time for evolution.
Despite their lushness, rainforests are dynamic. Natural fires are rare, and tree fall from old age or hurricanes is the main disturbance, creating gaps for new growth. However, this biome faces rapid destruction, with half its original area already lost. The consequences for global biodiversity are dire.
Indeed. Threats include logging and conversion to cropland, which dramatically increases fire susceptibility. And surprisingly, tropical soils often prove fragile and infertile when cleared because most of their nutrients are tied up in the vegetation. Once that's removed, rapid loss of fertility occurs, making sustainable agriculture difficult.
Next, let's go to the other extreme, the deserts. These occur where precipitation is extremely low, less than 20 centimeters per year, and highly unreliable, often combined with high daytime temperatures. They're typically found around 30 degrees north and south latitudes, driven by those global atmospheric high-pressure zones.
Deserts like the Sahara or those in the American Southwest exhibit incredible temperature extremes. Clear skies means scorching days, often over 36 degrees Celsius, but also rapid cooling at night as heat radiates away. Desert plants have evolved amazing adaptations. One strategy is annual growth. They survive dry times as seeds, germinate with rare rains, and then quickly flower and set new seeds before conditions dry out again. Deserts have a proportionally higher number of annual species than other biomes.
Then there are the distinctive succulents, water-storing perennials like the cacti of the New World. The barrel cactus, for instance, looks like an accordion with spines. Its folds swell when full of water and contract when dry. Its stomata are deep in valleys between folds protected by spines, allowing it to store enough water to photosynthesize for 40 days after the soil dries, then rapidly rehydrate after rain. This is an incredible evolutionary answer to extreme water scarcity, allowing them to thrive where others perish. Other desert plants have deep roots, like the creosote bush, tapping into deep, stable water reserves, with small, leathery leaves for efficient water use.
Moving to colder extremes, let's look at the taiga, or northern boreal forest. Here, winters are very short and extremely cold. Summers are short with long days, and there's persistent snow cover. Temperatures can swing wildly from -50 to 35 degrees Celsius.
The taiga covers vast areas of Russia, Scandinavia, and North America. Imagine uniform, dense northern forests dominated by conifers like spruce and larch. A significant and surprising feature of the taiga is permafrost, permanently frozen ground that underlies more than 3/4 of the northern taiga.
Permafrost has major ecological consequences. Water can't move through it, and if it thaws, surface soils destabilize, causing trees to tilt and fall over, creating what are known as drunken forests. Taiga soils are also highly acidic and low in nutrients. The tree species composition is limited, with few genera often forming dense, single-species stands. The evergreen habit is highly advantageous here. With a short growing season and low soil fertility, evergreens can photosynthesize immediately when conditions allow, making the most of every precious moment.
Finally, at the farthest northern limits of plant growth, we find the treeless biome of the Arctic tundra. This occupies a huge area, about 1/5 of Earth's land surface.
The Arctic tundra experiences an extreme seasonal climate. Long summer days balanced by dark, bitterly cold winters with high winds that desiccate plants. Frosts are common year-round. While precipitation is low, the ground is often wet due to underlying permafrost. The vegetation consists of low shrubs, grasses, sedges, lichens, and mosses. Many species have wide circumpolar ranges, and a high proportion are evergreen, again for immediate photosynthesis in a short growing season. Much of their biomass, surprisingly, is underground up to 98%, and vegetative propagation is common as seed establishment is rare.
Tundra plants also have another surprising adaptation: relatively large, showy flowers, like the mountain avens. These produce energy-rich rewards for pollinators, which are essential given the low temperatures at high latitudes. Poleward of the Arctic tundra is the ice desert, characterized by extreme physical conditions and essentially no vegetation, found in places like interior Greenland or much of Antarctica. Climate scientists, of course, predict a significant diminution of this polar ice cover in the future.
So what does all this mean for the future of our global home? The world population is projected to peak at 9 to 10 billion people by 2100. This presents a core question. Does more people mean more hands to work and brains to think, generating solutions, or does it mean more mouths to feed, more pollution, and land degradation?
Historically, increased human population has generally led to increased exploitation of the natural world. There are optimistic scenarios where innovative genius devises sustainable schemes, agricultural output doubles, and we hold the line on natural habitat destruction. But there are also bleak ones, where even with agricultural transformation, more people encroach on wild habitats, demanding resources, converting more land from natural landscapes, especially if agricultural productivity only increases slightly, and biomass energy is also needed.
And climate change further complicates things. Dire predictions mean more disruptions and instabilities, potentially preventing the full recovery of ecosystems. This creates immense pressure on conservationists. The response from conservationists is crucial, continuous counter efforts across a broad front. We need to protect nature not just for the essential ecological services like clean air and water it provides, but also for aesthetic and moral reasons. And underpinning all of this is the critical importance of a scientific understanding of how our world's ecosystems actually work to help us manage our global home. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, what stands out is the incredible, undeniable interconnectedness of everything. From the smallest microbial community in a pitcher plant to the vast movements of air and water shaping our global biomes, we've seen how energy flows in a one-way stream, constantly dissipating, while essential nutrients cycle endlessly. And critically, we've explored how interactions, be they competition, mutualism, or the constant arms race of plant defense, are the very fabric of life. This raises an important question. In a world facing such profound and rapid changes, how can we best apply this understanding of ecological dynamism and complexity to foster resilience and protect the irreplaceable diversity that remains?
That's such a powerful way to frame it. What we've really delved into today is the story of constant change, constant adaptation, and the delicate balances that allow life to flourish in so many remarkable forms. From the duckweed experiment showing competitive exclusion to the massive scale of volcanic succession, and then to the grand patterns that define deserts and tundras, it's clear that our planet is a living, breathing, constantly evolving system. As you, our learner, continue your own journey of discovery, remember these principles. The dynamism of nature, the sheer complexity and diversity of life, the profound interconnectedness of all living things, and the fact that our understanding is always evolving. There's always more to learn, and that's truly exciting. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the raven biology of plants. We, the Last Minute Lecture team, hope this exploration has given you a richer foundation for understanding our natural world and inspires you to continue asking questions and seeking out those aha moments.